Thank you for joining us for The Sky Above, where we'll tell you everything happening in the sky this upcoming month so you can plan ahead and know when to look up. I'm meteorologist Leah Pezzetti. Here's what is heading your way right now on this January episode. January marks the final of 4 chronological supermoons. We'll dive deeper into the makeup of the moon and when you'll be able to see the next supermoon. Plus, another impressive meteor shower will fly through the sky this month, the timing of that, and how to make sure you catch it even with the bright supermoon. And later on, there are many key players in space exploration. A new guest joins me to discuss how current cuts are impacting the race back to space and how that's having a domino effect locally. Thanks for being with us for this January episode of The Sky Above. I'm your host, meteorologist Leah Pezzetti. I am joined, as always, by NASA's Solar System Ambassador and member of the Seattle Astronomical Society, Keith Crum. Keith, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you very much. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year 2026. Oh my goodness, I can't believe we made it. All right, let's start where we always do, of course, with our full moon. It's inching earlier and earlier in the month. This month, January, it's on the 3rd.
January 3rd, yeah, just around the corner. It is the 4th supermoon, as you said, and in a row, and we won't have another one until next November. It's a supermoon because it's at perigee, closest to the Earth, so that can affect the tides. It is called the wolf moon, which I like that. Don't you like that? I like that idea of the howling at the moon.
Yeah,
and the wolves.
I think there's a song about that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also called by the Dakota people the severe moon or the hard moon, which also makes a lot of sense. So,
yep. And a couple planets will also be visible.
Yep, Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is at opposition, which means it's on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, so it'll be very bright, along with the very bright 4 moons of Jupiter, including the largest moon in the solar system, Ganymede.
Okay.
So that'll be great with binoculars.
Okay. Okay. So January 3rd is the full moon, the final supermoon, but of course we love our dark sky.
Yeah.
So January 18th is when you will have the lowest impact from the moon and be able to see the coolest things in the sky.
Yeah, that'll be a great night with the new moon, and it's it'll be a really. Let's see what the forecast says.
Now we just hope for clear skies.
Yeah, clear skies.
Okay, and we talk about the moon every month. How about we get to know the moon a little bit better, shall we?
Yeah,
good. Let's talk about the makeup of the moon. It was once part of Earth?
Once part of Earth, so something big hit the moon. There's different conjectures about what that is, but it was over 4 billion years ago. And then it kind of crashed a whole bunch of material, and over many millions of years, all that material came together and formed our moon.
Okay, and you have an example here.
I have a little.
Okay, so can I hold the moon?
Yeah.
Are you going to get Earth?
Yeah, I'll get Earth.
Okay, grab Earth really quickly for me, Keith.
So we want to talk about distance.
Yes.
So some people, we're not sure. This is an 8-inch globe.
Okay.
And that's a quarter of the size of this, about 2 inches, which is correct.
Okay.
And so we want to talk about how far away
the distance
would be at this scale.
Okay. At this scale, I would estimate, I don't know, somewhere around here. That looks pleasant. That looks nice,
does look
right?
Pleasant.
Am I right?
Let's do it to the right dimension.
Okay.
How's that?
Okay.
You ready?
Standing up. Okay. Here we go. Farther. Keep going.
Farther.
Keep going.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit a camera.
What is that? About 20 feet right there?
20 feet?
20 feet.
Can you see me in the camera? Okay, so this is the actual distance of the moon from Earth.
At this scale.
Oh my goodness. Okay,
Isn't that surprising?
And I want everybody to remember this. We're gonna keep talking about this later with our next guest. We're gonna talk about the moon and the journey to the moon. So keep that in mind as we discuss later on in the show. The moon and our journey back to the moon. Okay, so that's really interesting about the moon. Any other fun facts for you? Maybe the composition?
Composition is similar to Earth.
Okay.
So because it came from Earth, it's similar to Earth. That's why we kind of know that it, came from Earth originally, because it's the same materials.
But no atmosphere. That's the big difference.
No atmosphere. It does have water at the poles, which is really important when we talk about Artemis and other things. It's really important to know that there's water there, and so that's a resource, among other things.
And that's why we're focused on going back to the moon.
Right.
Okay.
and why we want to go to the poles,
Okay.
or a pole.
Okay, all right. We'll keep that in mind. We're going to put a pin in that. But
right.
let's talk about our next sky viewing event for the month of January.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, one of the best meteor showers of the year will align with the supermoon in early January.
Yeah.
This doesn't work for viewing because we have the bright moon kind of hinders the view of the meteor shower. But let's discuss it anyway. The quadrantids meteor shower.
Quadrantids, yes. Very bright, very active, 120 an hour without a new moon.
Wow.
You'd probably be able to see some of the brighter ones, even with the full moon, I mean.
Okay.
Not new moon, full moon.
So the 60 to 200, that would be best case if we had a new moon, but
Yeah.
we're battling a full moon.
Yeah.
So what's
Yeah.
the reality for what we're actually going to see here?
Well, a few maybe, but
Okay.
I would say what I'm going to do is watch for a clear night in the week following that.
Okay.
It'll be further away, the moon will be further away from full.
Okay.
And also be setting, so you can actually get out there and see some of the quadrantids maybe a little later in the month.
Okay, and they are visible through mid-January.
Yes.
Okay, and these are a little bit different. They're fireballs. They're known for their fireballs. Makes them seem brighter.
Yeah, well, you get the larger pieces of iron coming through and burning up. This comes from an asteroid as opposed to a dirty snowball. We've talked about dirty snowballs. Those are normal comets. This is actually the parent body of the quadrantids is an asteroid.
Okay. Oh my goodness. All right.
Yeah.
So we will maybe shoot for, I don't know, what do you think, January 10th
I said the
to the
10th.
12th?
I said
Okay.
around the 10th, a week later,
All right.
a much better chance of seeing something. Of course, it's way off peak by then.
Yeah, okay. Well,
But it's still active.
We may have
Still
missed it. Okay,
Yeah.
hopefully people see it. All right, let's talk about some constellations. Orion and the Orion Nebula
Yes.
will be visible.
Yes. Orion's my favorite
Is it?
constellation, actually. I think it's just beautiful. It's large in the sky. It's easily identifiable. You can pick out the belt right away. You know, it has some famous stars in it. So, it's great. Now, right below, that's a picture I took from my yard, actually.
Beautiful.
And this is a picture I also took from my yard of the Orion Nebula.
Wow.
So this is with a new, fantastic kind of telescope that's just for astrophotography, and that's about. You can see that with your naked eye, actually, the Orion Nebula.
Cool.
But the thing to see it with is about a 50-minute exposure, which is what that is.
Wow. Okay.
50 minutes.
And when is the best time to view this in the month?
Oh, anytime it's clear.
Okay.
Anytime it's clear. This is a great winter constellation, and you can see the Orion Nebula with your naked eye.
Beautiful. Okay, and we are running out of time, but I quickly want to talk about dark sky etiquette, of course. We
Yep.
always talk about the red
Yep.
light etiquette.
Yep.
If you are going to head out, Seattle Astronomical Society is always hosting star parties. You can go out and view the beautiful things. What's this one for us this month?
Well, I brought this red light because,
Whoa,
isn't that a cool one?
that is a cool one.
This I use when I do sketching.
Okay.
So I love to do sketching.
Okay.
And, it's sort of an ancient art sketching
Yeah.
different things. So there it is.
There we go. Okay, so you like to go out and sketch
So
what
this
you
is-
see through your
this is the
telescope?
sketching. Yeah.
Okay.
And then to use red light, you can just put that there
Oh.
and you can do the sketching and not hurt your eyes so badly with white light.
It's like a reading light for
Yeah,
sketching.
it is a reading light.
A red reading light
That was kind of.
for astronomy. I love it. I love it. It's nifty. All right, Keith, as always, thank you
All
so
right.
much for your expertise. We will
Okay.
keep our eyes up and hopefully we see some of these cool events. We are going to take a break, but still ahead after this break, plans to go back to the moon are about to launch. But how the current budget cuts could slow that down. A new guest joins us this month to discuss the race back to space. welcome back. Space exploration has rapidly sped up in recent history, but now is facing some major slowdowns. Here to discuss the current status of NASA cuts and what that means for big picture space exploration is Casey Dreyer, Chief of Space Policy at nonprofit The Planetary Society. Thank you so much for being with me, Casey.
Thanks for having me.
So first, let's start with a little bit of background. You are a podcast host, among other things, but let's talk about the Planetary Society. What is this group? You advocate for space exploration in DC?
All around the world, but yes, I mean, the advocacy is done in DC, but we are a membership organization that anyone can join. So we're not a professional organization, we don't represent industry, we just represent people. People care about exploration, science. It was founded by Carl Sagan back in 1980. We're led by Bill Nye, our local Seattle connection here, and of course King 5's Almost Live star, right?
Yep.
Science guy, of course. But it's an organization that just cares about this stuff. And so we try to have members all over the country. We get them organized to share their passion for space with the people who make the decisions about funding it, and that's what my job is. We also do a lot of education. We built our own CubeSat and launched it into space a few years ago that deployed solar sail and flew around. So we do lots of things for a humble little independent nonprofit that's been around for almost 50 years now.
Oh my goodness, incredible. Love to hear it. Okay, so let's talk about the current situation right now. We, of course, have been talking for months now about current federal cuts. NASA is one of those organizations that is feeling the impacts. Where do we stand right now as far as those budget cuts are concerned?
So we have an unresolved budget. We have a situation where NASA is being proposed to be cut by a quarter. NASA science activities, all the robotic spacecraft, all the research that's done here in Washington State and elsewhere around the country is facing a nearly 50% cut, 47%. And Congress is pushing back on those. We've seen really positive progress from both the House and Senate on those, led by the president's own party. But we have not gotten that across the finish line.
So what are we seeing here? This is a graph here. So that's back in the 80s, or I guess the 60s is when it peaked.
Yeah. That's Apollo right there. So that big hump is Apollo. That's where the country basically marshaled the equivalent of a wartime mobilization of personnel and material and money to land people on the moon within 9 years.
Okay.
After that, they were done with Apollo. They didn't want to pay that much money anymore. NASA dropped down and spent roughly about $25 billion a year on average since the 1970s. There's a little peak there for Challenger, a peak for the space station. We've had a nice little run up, but this proposal is the red part, cuts it down, and this is inflation adjusted to the lowest level actually since 1961.
Okay.
And this is in a situation, and we're not ending a moon program here. We're starting one. We're trying to do a ton of different things. And so this is just, it's a catastrophically largest, actually the largest single year proposed cut for NASA ever in its history.
Okay, and let's talk about some of those impacts. With those cuts, what would that do for the workforce and the active missions right now?
I mean, you would end a third of NASA's active science missions. You would end a number of projects in human spaceflight that involve our international partners, the Europeans and Japanese and others. You would decimate aeronautics research, the first A in NASA, right? The advanced materials and understanding how to improve traffic flight patterns. You would end, again, scientific research across the country. And you would completely destroy these pipelines of bringing students into this field of science. And whether they go into space science or whether they go into aerospace or not, they're being trained to how to be good thinkers, highly skilled people on the edge of capability that then disseminate throughout our country. You completely disrupt that pipeline. So it's a complete it's like tying our own shoes and then flying forward and falling on our faces. It's no sense, and this is why you've seen, again, members of the president's own party ready to firmly reject this. It's not a well thought through situation. So it's a disastrous and very disruptive outcome.
Yeah, and let's talk about the future moving forward. In the next couple months, there are major steps being taken getting back into space. When we saw that graph, we saw the way it went up. That was our first journey to the moon, the investments made there. We're hoping to go back in February.
Yes, and you notice there's not an equivalent big bump that's tracking that, right? So this is trying to go back with the Artemis program. This actually begun under Trump first term. It carried through under President Biden. The first time a human return to the moon program ever survived a presidential transition.
Wow.
It's actually relatively popular. It has been well thought through. It involves private industry. It involves classic NASA contractors, NASA itself, science. But there's a ton of uncertainty now because of these budget things. And so we have a situation where 4 astronauts are getting ready to launch on a rocket that was first started development in 2010. It has flown once. It's the big, expensive government rocket, but it's the one we have. They will go around the moon, come back, and it'll be the first time humans will have left Earth's orbit since 1972. So that's a really big deal. They're not going to land on the moon, but they're going to fly around it.
Right.
And that's, again, that's the first time anyone will have done that in half a century.
So what do all of these cuts mean for that mission? Can that still happen?
Yes, they're prioritizing human spaceflight to the moon. However, there's the longer, what's the scientific return of that going to be? What's the long-term science impact? And then, of course, our partners across, and allies across the world are supposed to be building this permanent lunar infrastructure. We're not going back to the moon to put boot prints and a flag again. We're going there to stay, do long-term science, build a lunar economy. If there's not confidence that that will happen, all of this other support, all of this ability of commercial companies to raise money, of the scientific community to make it worth the astronauts risking their lives to do this, what are we doing this for? We want to gain fundamental understanding about where the moon came from, the history of the solar system, where we came from, and all of that starts to go away if these budget cuts still happen.
Right, and we've talked about this on previous episodes of The Sky Above. We've talked about that goal of getting there in the next, 5 years or so? Mm-hmm. And the significance and the reason behind that is because other countries have intentions and plans to do so. We want to be the first ones to set the standards, correct? And
that's one of the big motivations for going there this time. So we can't be first. We were first. The United States was first back in the 1960s. China wants to go, and there's this, how you operate, how you maneuver the areas where you can potentially get resources. Those are all motivations to go soon. But at the same time, we don't want to, again, go too fast and ignore these other important things. We want an enduring presence there. And so we need to have these enduring situations so we don't see that huge drop in funding again, right? Where we don't have a situation, well, okay, we did a couple landings, we got our pictures of ourselves holding the flag, and then we go home. No, I want the United States to have a space program that has its own innate reasons and not reactive to what other countries are doing, right? And the core essence and the idea of Artemis this time was to do that. And so we have a motivation to go fast, but we have an intrinsic value that's a benefit to the nation to stay.
Why do you think it's important to change the budget right now and make sure that this funding is in place?
Yeah. So this is one of those long-term investments for the nation. I always think of this as the equivalent of why does Mercedes-Benz build F1 racing cars, right? They're not selling them to anybody. They're very expensive. They're very strange and unique. But what they're doing is that they are pushing their engineers to do the most advanced, hard, difficult things, and that knowledge, that hard-won knowledge, then feeds back to the entire company. That's what the space program does for our country. We go to the most difficult place possible, the place that wants to kill you every second you're there, which is space. And we say, well, we're going to be there anyway. We're going to drag a bubble of Earth there with us, and we're going to survive. That challenges our engineers, our technicians, our scientific, even building the actual materials themselves. You better have high quality stuff to keep you alive in space. So by doing that, as fractional, we're talking about less than 1/2% of our annual expenditures. We do that, that all feeds back into the country, and also I'd say to our students, to young people, to middle-aged and older people like myself, it's good to be forward-looking. Right? It's literally pulling us up and out of ourselves. Instead of down in our cell phones, swiping on TikTok, we're looking out and wondering what's out there. There's a profound, valuable aspect of motivation and big picture thinking that enables us to do with a space program. So again, it's a tiny fractional thing. Cutting it by this much destroys the space program and saves us functionally no money. Right? That rounds to zero in government spending. But if we preserve that, we can preserve the spark, and it's one of those things that's the rare unifying aspect that we still have in this country that I really want to keep doing.
And quickly, do you think it will be feasible for us to establish a presence on the moon, people living, doing research on the moon in the next 5 years?
I think we can get started. In 5 years, that's the tricky part. I think we can land people in 5 years. Then we build out that infrastructure, I'd say by the end of next decade, absolutely. We would have maybe something like Antarctica. I'm not talking about hotels or Marriotts here, right? We're talking about a research station, but that's on the moon. That's a pretty big deal. Being a place that we can go regularly to the moon, that we have maybe a commercial sector that's also at the same time building propellants or being able to build out infrastructure to enable more people to go, more things to go, and enable this long-term expansion of not just humanity, but human knowledge out beyond Earth. That is all very doable. And I think we have the foundations for that, and it's keeping that going.
Okay. All right, Casey, I'm going to keep you here. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, this race to space is rooted heavily in the state of Washington. We are going to look at multiple Washington companies who could potentially feel the domino effects of these cuts. Casey Dreyer, Chief of Space Policy at nonprofit The Planetary Society. Thank you for staying with me today. Okay, so we've discussed some big picture conversations here with NASA budget cuts. Let's talk about the local effects. Washington is a hub for many key players in the aerospace world. So with looming cuts, that could have impacts on our jobs here locally. Here's some numbers that you've shared with us. NASA's business here supports more than 7,000 jobs in Washington, generating more than $1 billion annually. So this is big impacts locally. Who are some of the key players here that we're talking about?
Yeah, I like to say that Washington is a space state that doesn't know it. We're one of the top 10 states for NASA investment and aerospace in the country. And this is a huge opportunity for us. This is cutting edge stuff. And so, of course, we are very fortunate to have Blue Origin, which is one of the most important now private rocket companies. They're tasked with providing a lunar lander for NASA for Artemis to land astronauts on the surface of the moon. They're building up a whole new separate launch capability. That is a huge deal. They're a very important company, and that's where the majority of this NASA investment comes in. They have big contracts with NASA to land astronauts. But we have a really diverse set of scientific and smaller companies all across the state that benefit and do real important work with what NASA does. And so we have scientific research in monitoring climate change and ice sheet movements through University of Washington. We run the Mars rover partially out of Western Washington University up in Bellingham. We have huge initiatives in STEM and student education in indigenous schools across the state, trying to bring in students of a variety of backgrounds into this pipeline to become scientific thinkers funded by NASA. A lot of those, particularly the STEM initiatives funding students, are completely zeroed out in the budget that we're facing. That would all go away completely. A lot of the other stuff would be cut or reduced in scale. A lot of the earth science and climate monitoring would be really impacted. And you're talking about, again, severe consequences here in Washington state, not something that's happening out there. Every dollar that's spent on NASA is spent on Earth, and a lot of it's spent in Washington state.
Why is Washington such a hub? How did we become that place?
Jeff Bezos apparently liked living here. I think was part of it. But for everything else, well, I mean, we have, of course, a long history of aerospace in Washington state with Boeing. We have a really dynamic and very capable research institution at the University of Washington, a research hub, and that has specialized in astrobiology and space science. It's been part of active NASA science missions. And then we've been able to attract incredible talent from around the country to come live here in Washington and develop this new space sector that's happening, not just because of Blue Origin, but because of all the dynamic changes. Our tech sector, having a lot of investors, but also then having a very wonderful place that provides opportunities for scientific research, and a state, frankly, that invests in its public university system. All of this stuff happening in Washington state for science is in our public university system. Wow. That's incredible, right?
Yeah.
And so we're providing students, whether they go to Western or Central or University of Washington, with opportunities to work on real in-flight NASA missions today.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible opportunity for students who may have never known that was a pathway for them.
Yeah.
And that's what this type of stuff provides.
And they're the future. Let's go through some of those dollar amounts, shall we, and talk about, big impact, right?
Yeah.
These are some of the numbers that we're talking. I'm seeing millions, and of course, Blue Origin, billions of dollars.
Absolutely. So these are various types of contracts that support at Aerojet Rocketdyne, advanced propulsion, ion propulsion. We have contracts that observe the Earth, that are trying to help reduce what's called orbital debris around the Earth to prevent us from, spacecraft from running into things. And of course, Blue Origin landing on the moon. And again, a lot of these are really potentially severely disrupted. The exact consequences we don't know yet. And it may not happen as we get our way, right? Trying to push the resistance, this resistance through. And I'll just mention our own Senator Cantwell has been pushing hard to not let this happen as well. So she is aware of this, and I think have been a very good partner with a lot of bipartisan support pushing against this. So this is not a Democrat and Republican thing. This is a United States preserving its leading role in space science and exploration globally.
And so much of that is rooted
here?
Right here in Washington.
Look at that. And we have a beautiful place to live on top of that.
Yes, Jeff Bezos knew what he was talking about there. Casey, thank you so much for all of your expertise and knowledge. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for being with us on this January edition of our monthly astronomy show, The Sky Above. I'm meteorologist Leah Pezzetti. We'll be back next month.